All right, we are live here on the Paced Happiest Hour, and today it is indeed the happiest hour because it's our special craft beer edition. So I am so excited today to be
Cheers.
joined by Garrett Oliver from Brooklyn Brewing. We've got Bart Watson from the Brewers Association, and we're going to be joined in just a little bit by David Walker from Firestone Walker and Jess Reiser from Burial Beer Company. And we also, of course, have Jim Varell, our resident beer expert here at Pace Magazine. So welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Howdy.
Good to be here.
So Happiest Hour is always, there's always a beer element to what we do. In the middle of every episode, we're raising our glasses and celebrating.
I have a beer element standing by.
All right. I have a couple.
Got a good one.
Garrett, I also have a beer element standing by.
Nice one.
Just so happened to be in the fridge.
This just happened to be in my fridge.
So we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but I wanted to start out. There's that old adage that one of the few things that's recession-proof is beer and liquor. And that is always assumed that we could all go out and enjoy the beer and liquor that, at a bar, at a pub, at a restaurant, wherever. This is entirely new to have so many bars and restaurants shutting down. There's still, grocery stores, liquor stores, sometimes on-premises sales in the breweries starting to come back a little bit. But this has been really hard on the beer industry. And I was wondering if, I guess, Garrett, to start out, what has this meant so far to Brooklyn Brewing?
Well, I think it's been, in some ways, it's been particularly tough for us because we are an on-premise brand more than most breweries. Certainly more than most modern breweries in the United States. So many of them are based on a taproom model or whatever else. But we built our strength over the last 30 years in bars and restaurants. And so that is a big percentage, 40 to 50% in all the various places that we sell beer, which is in 35 countries. And our foreign component is about half of our business. So as you've seen shutdowns in different places, whether it's Sweden or France or or wherever else, that has affected us in different ways. But one thing that is certainly true is that we don't have what now looks like a luxury of being a supermarket brand, because New Yorkers, we don't really go to supermarkets. We go to the butcher and we go to the fish guy and we go to the coffee guy. And that's the way a lot of us do our shopping. And then we're buying our beers, a 6-pack or sometimes even a single bottle, at a time. It's not really a place that people are, buying cases. New Yorkers don't generally have any room in their apartments for cases. And so it's a really different environment for us. And so, it certainly has hit sales hard. We look at numbers like IRI numbers that are really counting supermarket sales. And we see big gains in that channel for some breweries. And we've seen Brooklyn Lager go up in that channel and whatever else. But it's been a really rude awakening. And for me personally, I was supposed to be in 4 or 5 different countries over the next over the past couple of months. I travel a lot in the spring, as many of us do, and it's just like everything wiped out, just like this and that. I try to be mindful, though. I have friends who have worked on books for 12 years that released them into this season. People who are supposed to appear at South by Southwest, and this is their big break. And this was their big break in their entire career, and getting canceled and whatever else. So I have to say that a lot of the stories that we see around us, not just medically, but otherwise, put our struggles into some perspective. I mean, we'll come out of it, but I don't think anybody knows what the future looks like.
Yeah. And I know for you guys, you've put a lot of effort into building the Brooklyn brand overseas. And in addition to New York just being so hard hit by this virus, some of the places that you've spent the most time seem to also be getting more than their share of getting hit by this. So I know that's been tough.
We've had meetings like, online meetings, Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, where we have 15 people in 7 or 8 different countries talking about, hey, well, what's going on where you are in Sweden, in London, in Paris, in Japan, what's going on. And it's in a really different place everywhere. Some places never really shut down completely, like Sweden and Japan, never really completely shut. And we will see what does it look like in a year. I've seen a lot of different predictions made, but I think that the losses in bars and restaurants are going to be well beyond what the average person thinks. 30 to 50%, I think, of all restaurants and bars may not reopen.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Presumably that would mean a boom in first-time restaurant openings after that. Wouldn't you think of people stepping in to pick up the scraps?
There are so many cascading effects that I think that in many ways we may see New York become more like the rest of the country, where we might have chain restaurants and whatever else being restaurants. Here, where we don't really have those. We have a really powerful independent restaurant and bar scene. Chains they largely ignore New York City. But I think that may change. We might have a huge drop in real estate prices, which will drive certain things. But some people have fled the city. They're like, I want to get the hell out of here. This is terrible. And that might provide room for artists to come back and for musicians to be able to have studio space again and whatever else. So I think that in a certain way, this could be like a forest fire. It's horrible. It comes through, it burns everything, absolute destruction. And then the sunlight reaches the forest floor and stuff starts growing like crazy. I think there was an article in the Atlantic that kind of put it out there, that way. Or like the stock market, where there's a stock market crash and a lot of people, they cash out, and those are the people who get screwed. Because,
I think that applies to breweries as well. I think we're going to see some not survive this. And I think there's a lot of people that are doing everything they can to make sure that the breweries that they love, that they go to, that they're regular, are going to survive. And so the ones that have, built that passionate fan base hopefully will make it through this. Bart, what are you seeing nationwide here?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I think that's completely correct, that this is where that brand equity that you've built pays off, because what we're seeing is not too dissimilar. Obviously the shopping patterns are pretty different than New York, but to what Garrett described, where breweries that are on-premise heavy, which is most small brewers. On-premise is about 20%. So by on-premise, bars and restaurants is about 20% of total beer in the U.S. But for craft brewers, in total, it's 40 to 50%, and for many, it's much more. The smallest brewers have that tap room or brew pub model, and that's in most places completely shut down. It's been, if there's been a silver lining, it's been awesome to watch breweries transition their business models, sell more beer to go, sell beer via delivery. We're starting to see, the first seeds of direct to consumer, shipping beer, which was already there, but this has certainly put some wind in the sails of that in the beer market. And, if you're a consumer and you have to change your pattern, you have to actually go to a brewery to pick up beer now, as opposed to just, down the street. You really have to be a fan of that brewery. So, I think it's true that the breweries that built that brand equity over years are reaping those benefits right now, and are the ones that are the most able to pivot and seize some of the new opportunities that exist.
is there any data that stands out to either you, Bart, and in your firsthand observation, Garrett, style-wise, in terms of, has this quarantine era sort of affected what people want to drink in any way? I feel like there's an old adage that and I've heard places referencing that people want cheap and simple during this kind of thing, especially if there's economic uncertainty. But I'm curious if that extends to the choices they're making when it comes to something like craft beer.
I think people certainly want reliable. If you're going to foray out to a brewery or you're going to the supermarket, and these days a trip to a supermarket is a pretty fraught experience for a lot of people, you don't want to be wasting your time on buying, a single 6-pack of something that maybe kind of might be good. And I think that in some ways, we as an established craft brewery have disadvantages, but that's an advantage in a certain way. People trust us. You go get Brooklyn beer, it's going to be good. You're not going to have any problems. It's going to taste nice. And I think that is more of an advantage now than it was in the past, where people were constantly always looking for new things. Now new things are nice, but they don't look quite as shiny, perhaps, as they did a couple of months ago. I don't know what Bart's saying.
Yeah, I'd expand on that, and I'd agree, and I'd probably put a slightly different motivation. I'm not sure it's a matter of what the consumer wants beer-wise, is how much they want to shop differently. Craft beer was about discovery. It was about going down that beer aisle and, picking cans up and looking at them. Nobody's going to be picking up and handling multiple cans that they're not going to buy anymore. So, one thing we're seeing in the data, for instance, is a move to bigger pack sizes. That craft beer has long been really 6-pack heavy, and that's still true to a certain extent, but that people are buying more 12 packs, more 15 packs, because they don't want to spend a lot of time in the store. They want to go in, get something, and I think that does speak to the familiarity aspect, that something that they know. If you're buying 12 or 15, you're investing a little bit more money, and so you're going to buy something that and trust. And I don't think this is a long-term shift per se, and that we may see some of that variety come back as things get back to whatever normal looks like. But certainly, yeah, you're seeing in the data people are buying, similar styles, but typically in bigger packs, and things like mixed packs, which hadn't been doing as well, are doing a lot better, I think, for the same reason. I want to get a bunch of stuff, but I don't want to find all 4 packs, so I can buy a 24 bottle or can mixed pack and satisfy that need.
And a lot of New York City breweries are continuing, like they have 3 or 4 releases every week. The only new release that we're doing is actually going to be coming up, and it's a collaboration between us and Wellworks, and that we're actually going to can up, and it'll be our first foray into selling directly from our tasting room, probably like having people every 6 feet outside, as you see around a lot of the rest of the country. Out of not an excess, but out of extreme caution, given the fact that we've been in a hot spot, we've basically avoided doing that. But we've made the beer into something that gives back to a local community group. So, it's going to support the Service Workers Coalition, which is helping out people who worked in the food service and hospitality industry, all of whom essentially are currently out of work.
Mm-hmm. What kind of beer is that, Garrett?
It is, I think, appropriately kind of a hybrid between a Saison and a modern IPA. Mm-hmm. So it's 20% oats. It's fermented with London 3, but it has a Saison-like mash. So it has about 1.5 Plato. So it's really dry. And kind of crackling, but it's got no enzymes in it because we don't like that. So it's delicious.
It sounds really delicious.
Good. Yeah, it's called Boundary.
Is selling it here in Colorado too. I want to try that now.
Yeah, it's called Boundary Spell. And I kind of came up with that because it's kind of an idea from, I don't know, like witchcraft or fantasy, where you cast a spell of protection, around yourself. To keep out enemies, or in this case, unseen enemies that all of us are worried about. So, Boundary Spell will be available from the brewery soon.
Very cool.
Bart, I think we can probably assume that overall 2020 craft beer numbers are going to look a little rough for obvious reasons. I'm curious if you have any of the preliminary data when it comes to that. Just how rough are things going to be looking?
Yeah, let me see you guys ask a lot of down questions for a happiest hour.
How rough is it? It's so rough.
So I think for craft, so craft's on a 30 to 40 year streak of growing every year, and this is looking like the first year that it's not going to grow, and a lot of that is because of what we've already talked about, that so much of that craft volume flows through a channel which is on premise with bars and restaurants that's really shut down. But we've done some preliminary surveying, and when we first did this, craft was down 25 to 30% in the period we were looking at. I think things have improved. We've seen some better signs, both from to-go, delivery, package sales picking up. Now on-premise is starting to reopen, and in some states it's slow, but it is, people are drinking beer outdoor again. So all of this really for the full year depends on what getting back the on-premise looks like, and how those trend lines look. But I think, we're probably going to see craft be down at least, 5 to 10% this year. And, if on-premise has to reclose, for instance, a lot of this still depends on, the course of the pandemic and what public health authorities need to do to control that, particularly in the fall. Then things could get worse and back closer to those, 20-25% numbers that we were finding. It's extra unfortunate too that it looked like another year of growth. The first quarter looked good. If anything, some of the supermarket sales data was better than it had been in 2019. So, I think we were poised for another year of growth, and we're just, due to unusual circumstances, going to have a tough year for a lot of breweries.
Well, on a happier note, here in Georgia, it's the breweries are struggling as always, but the restrictions have been loosened. Georgia's been awful, as you guys know, in terms of what you can do as a brewery, what you can do in terms of a restaurant. And now I can get beer delivered. I can get beer as a to-go thing from a restaurant. And the government has considered breweries essential businesses, and there's a lot of things happening that I hope can maybe carry over. Have you seen much of that nationwide, where states are just letting things a little bit looser to try to keep this industry going?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a lot of state ABCs, use their regulatory authority to loosen things, to make it easier, not just for breweries, but bars and restaurants. More freedom in beer to go, more freedom in delivery, from even local authorities. Now we're seeing more freedom in what outdoor space you can use to sell beer. So allowing, licensed permittees to use their parking lot, for instance, so that they have more outdoor space. And, I'm hopeful we'll see some of that stay, at least in the medium term. That this is going to be something that takes a while to get back to normal. So I hope we see some of these either executive orders or, regulatory rulings extended and allow people to do this. And, in the longer term, I hope it makes some people rethink too, just beverage alcohol laws in general. Some of these people are going to consumers are going to find new ways that they like buying beer safely from their local breweries. Restaurants are going to find a new source of revenue. And so, I think we're going to see some action over the next 6 to 12 years to ask why some of those rules were in place, and, where it makes sense and where it can still be safe to, allow a little more freedom in buying beverage alcohol in the United States and modernize some of those rules.
And it's a possibility that, people will come up with formulas that make sense for everybody overall. We look at the systems that we have as, kind of rigid facts on the ground a lot of the time, but we see now how completely fluid they can be when everybody's up against the wall. And it could be that in the future, people will have a discussion with their wholesaler and they'll be like, well, which brands of ours do you want? And it's like, well, we want these 5 and we don't want the long tail. It's like, well, can we sell the long tail through whatever. And they're like, great, we don't care because that supports the brand. And it all and the customer is happier because now they can get beer to go from their local restaurant. And, the wholesaler's not dealing with 15 brands from one brewery anymore, and everything is maybe more effective for everybody. I mean, that's maybe a hope for outcome if that's what everybody wants to see happen. But I think that we can now see a number of possible futures play out at once in a lot of different places, and that's never this is all a bad thing. But being able to see a bunch of possible futures played out at the same time, so you can put them next to each other and have a look, is in of itself not a bad thing.
All right. Well, we are going to bring in a couple more guests here.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
Hey guys.
Welcome, David. Welcome, Jess.
Hi, how's it going?
You push that barge button.
So if anybody didn't hear at the beginning, we now also have with us Jess Reiser, co-founder of Burial Brewing, and David Walker from Firestone Walker. Welcome, guys.
Yeah,
Greetings.
thanks for having us.
So we have a lot of the country covered here. David, you're out in California. Jess, you're in North Carolina. I wanted, now that we've got everybody here, to ask a question about the beer itself. What new beer styles, or what beer styles do you feel are about to have a resurgence right now? What are you excited about personally, or just in general? David, I'll start with you.
I wish it was this. This is the first beer we made. It's an English pale ale, double barrel ale, and I literally have to hand sell this now to get it out of the brewery. But who knows? God, who knows what's next? I know what's now. I mean, it's a series of fruit-forward IPAs. I mean, fruit and flavor and some haze, low calorie, maybe lower alcohol. Just well-made, innovative beer, I think, is what's catching people's attention. I don't know, Jess?
Yeah, I kind of like the structure that David answered in, which is, kind of the now. For us, we've definitely been leaning into the imperial pastry stout game pretty heavily, and kind of up the ante during this COVID crisis. Sorry, the dinging. But for me personally, what I've kind of come back full circle to are just like clean saisons. We made what we're calling a camp saison, which is a nod to our new-ish restaurant, Forestry Camp. And it's just the perfect like end of work day, sun shining kind of beer. So that's where I'm at.
It's funny that you say that, Jess, because Burial is known for a lot of things. You're obviously known for IPA, known for stouts and everything. But I've always said to people over the years that the best thing you guys do is saison. And then you won our blind tasting of saisons when we did that way back. I think it was like 116 saisons, and it was Burial Separation of Light and Darkness was number one. I always love trying your wild stuff. It's my favorite things you do.
Yeah, we were on the verge of hosting Allagash's Saison Day in early April, which, it's always such an honor to host both Allagash's event, but just other breweries who focus on saisons. But yeah, that's a trend I hope eventually picks up, but we'll see.
Man, I would love to see that happening. I mean, the first saisons that we entered at ABF were in like 97, 98. And in those days, there was like 2 Belgian categories, and the category that saison was in had subcategories out to E. I remember that. It was A, B, C, and wit beer was one of them.
Okay.
Like B or something, and saison was E in the same category. And we've kind of gone through an arc where saisons became popular, and then kind of IPA became everything, and people, aren't paying as much attention to, a lot of the European styles anymore. So it's great to see that that you guys are selling saison. I heartily approve of that.
I heartily approve because it's one of my favorite styles. So I would hope that would be.
It's my favorite style, I think.
So Garrett, what are you seeing, or what are you hoping to see as far as style-wise, and where craft beer fans' palates are headed?
Well, I mean, we see, as I was saying, re-interest, in our flagship beer, Brooklyn Lager, which everybody knows, and they know they're going to be happy when they drink it. So I think that has a value for people right now, which is great. Maybe people will feel the same way about David's Double Barrel. I think that those are the kinds of beers, in a way, that I grew up on. 4 to 5%. I fell in love, like many of us, with beer living in England, and so very drinkable beers are something that I think people are looking for. But we also have, from our end, we have our non-alcoholic beer as well, which is doing extremely well. And so you see that, and plus a lot of people seeing higher alcohol beers go out as well at the same time. So older beers of ours, like East IPA, which is first brewed in 1995, and has always been 6.8, 6.9%. Suddenly you see that spiking in a way in the United States that it's been, for us, largely a beer that's grown more strongly overseas. So it's been pretty, it's interesting. And of course, I think sour beer is for everybody, especially as we get into the warmer weather.
Yeah.
Garrett, I just wanted to say that I really do like that. I like that non-alcoholic beer you guys have, Special Effects, and I find it is a great way to work sort of lower consumption into your normal beer drinking life. I drink it right alongside regular beer, regular full strength beer, and I just kind of treat it as the same thing. And I appreciate that it's not in the style of like an American lager, like so many non-alcoholic beers are. It's like people think there's only one way they can do non-alcoholic beer if they're going to do it, whereas Special Effects is kind of like a hoppy amber ale/lager.
Flavorful.
It's really nice to have as a change of pace.
Well, thanks. We backed Special Effects out of a completely different way of thinking, which was much more of a European way of thinking. As you know, in the United States, people, when they see a non-alcoholic beer, they think of, okay, whoever's drinking that must have a problem with alcohol. They don't say, well, maybe that person wants to go hiking in the morning, or maybe they want to do 3 Zoom happy hours in a row, and I've been caught with that, where you're like, wow, this is a lot of drinking. I got a 6 o'clock with these people, I got a 7 o'clock with these people, I got an 8 o'clock with these people, and you're expected to have like a beer in front of you, or some kind of drink for each of them, and that's like more than I had been doing. So, or you're home and you would like something with lunch. Now, up until now at the brewery, we don't drink at lunch. We got lots of work to do. But now I'm around the house and I got Special Effects. I'm like, hey, what could be better with this sandwich, than Special Effects? So it's really a fun beer to have, and it's definitely finding a place.
I have definitely found, as I've gotten older, that low alcohol is a feature, not a bug. when I'm picking what I'm going to drink next, it's like, oh, this is only 4.1. All right.
Man.
Well, I can still remember, and David will appreciate this. I still remember the morning, I should say, where I discovered that the old version of Ruddles County was no longer my session pint. Yeah, and the old version, he knows, the old version of Ruddles County wasn't that strong. It was like 5.5%, but we go out and drink like 8 of them.
Right.
And, you get to a certain age, which usually, happens in your late 20s, early 30s, and like, you're not doing that anymore. Like, it's like, hope you enjoyed it, because that thing is over. Goodbye to, your 20s liver. You're not getting that back. And so since I am 400 years old and have been here, for all time, I've always appreciated the lower alcohol beers. Like I said, I kind of grew up beer-wise drinking ordinary bitter.
Yeah.
So Bart, how about you? What are you seeing trend-wise? And is there a next big thing right now?
Yeah, I'm not sure that there is. I mean, getting to go last, I can summarize what we heard. We heard from David, light and sessionable with 805, and then fruit forward IPAs. We heard pastry stout. We heard saison. We heard non-alc. We heard lager. I mean, if you were to pick 6 points on the beer compass, those are about as far away as they could be. And I think that just shows craft has grown in terms of number of breweries. It's grown in terms of who drinks it in the parts of the country and the number of drinkers and its demographics. I mean, I'm definitely part of the no longer in my 20s looking for more sessionable things, drinking a lot more, lagers or lower ABV things so I can get up and chase my 2-year-old daughter around in the morning. But there's another generation that's discovering double IPAs and still wants those, and those are growing in scan too. So, I think we've reached a point where it's hard to say there's one next big thing other than maybe the 85 forms of IPA that we have today. Because those seem to be, if there's something that's recession-proof within beer, it may be IPA. But other than that, I think we're seeing more brewers explore more different parts of the beer universe. I think styles are becoming somewhat less relevant to the consumer, maybe not to the brewer, but to the consumer. And some of that is the brewer's fault that they stopped using styles in ways that were actually distinct and meaningful. But I think one other thing we're starting to see is more hybridization across beverage alcohol. You can find almost every beverage alcohol aged in every other type of beverage alcohol. There's a lot of cross-pollination going on, and beer wine hybrids, and companies that make both beer and spirits, and then are finding weird ways to mix those, or barrel-aged stuff. So people want to drink things that are tasty, and I think there's more points along the beverage alcohol spectrum where you can do that as long as you have a good brand story and you can tell the consumer what they're going to get.
What's funny to me is that I used to make fun of some younger people because, as you know, like the larger packages, like a 750, has really taken a beating, over the last few years. And people will come and they say, well, it's too big. I'm like, well, what do you mean it's too big? It wasn't too big 5 years ago. It was sounding like hotcakes. And now it's like, well, I can't drink it by myself. I'm kind of like, drink it by myself? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why would you want to drink it by yourself? Like, don't you have any friends? Well, guess what? Now none of us have any friends.
500 milliliters.
And we have to drink it by ourselves. So I think that the demise of the big bottle, I think I will predict will be hurried during this period.
Yeah, now you get an imperial stout like this, and I'm like, why is this in such a tall can?
Yeah.
Well, it was really interesting there for a few years where it was clear the writing was on the wall in terms of 750s starting to phase out, especially, but they remained in place for everybody's barrel-aged and special releases because no one wanted to be the brand making the first jump to offering those in 12-ounce cans, especially. Mm-hmm. Some brands like Firestone found smaller bottles to transition to.
Yep.
But there was a time there when it seemed like nobody wanted to be the one to start packaging a bourbon barrel-aged stout in a tiny can for fear that it wouldn't be seen as special.
Yeah, it's also like from a consumer standpoint, like they're like a price, like a price approach kind of differentiation between bottles and cans, even if they're call it the same amount of ounces, and so it's kind of interesting to think about. I've often been jealous of wine where they have one packaging type, everyone expects it in 750s, and we definitely have to take a lot of things into consideration as breweries with regards to can and bottles and their different sizes. Yeah,
Jim, that decision for the 12-ounce bottles was really just driven out of the fact that when we did a release of Parabola, we had 270 barrels, and we got fed up with, this was in the days when people would fight over beers like this. We were taking all this hate mail that they weren't able to get it. So we said, okay, let's make the beers smaller, and we have twice as many opportunities to please people. And you know what? It actually worked.
Well, that's win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. We get a lot of OCD fans because we get a lot of hate mail saying, this doesn't fit in my lineup anymore. Because you had the 750s.
Your
and the
vertical doesn't look
vertical.
Perfect. Yeah.
Well, you should refer them to the old Thomas Hardys then, and let them know that such has always been the way. No, we're talking this year about Black Ops, which is we've been doing it for 15 years or so. Barrel aged imperial stout, re-fermented in the bottle, which is one of its its main points. But it's also been on draft. And we're looking at, we're going to put it in a can. How are we going to handle this new situation? It's not really, draft's not going to come back all that quick. Mm-hmm. And if people are particularly now not going to want the bigger bottle. But I think we have to accept the fact that the can so far still is a devalued package,
right?
And I think that even when the 4-pack can cost $20, it's still a devalued package in a way by the consumer, and the brewer feels that way too. So they are, for the brewer who comes out with their brilliant new thing, in a can, I think for a lot of them it's kind of like getting married in your basketball shorts. It's just not. It's hard to have the same level of a sense of occasion. But on the other hand, you have such a great platform for graphics and whatever else. And I'm going to see if I can learn about can re-fermentation, which is I'm sure somebody's doing, but I haven't done yet.
Well, that's great. Well, before I lose Garrett and Bart, I would love, while we've got everybody here, to do what we do every episode of the Happiest Hour, and that is a round of toasts. And I will start us off. I'd like to raise a glass today to all the efforts from breweries to help out the hospitality industry, because I'm seeing it time and again in so many different ways. There you go, all together. That is a great project, and the version I had was really good, tasty too. So, but I would like to raise a toast to not just to the beer industry and the brewers doing this, but to those it's benefiting, which are all the out of work waiters and line cooks and everybody, bartenders, everybody who can't do what their job is right now. So cheers to all of them.
Cheers.
Gin.
I just cracked a Firestone Walker Flyjack.
Yes!
I was drinking a Brooklyn Lager, and I've switched cleverly over. I have two quick toasts. One to the drivers and delivery people who keep bringing me groceries on a weekly basis.
Yes.
So that I haven't been to a grocery store at this point in like a month and a half to 2 months, because these people will go and bring it to you, and really, I hope they're being paid well. We tip them, but you have to hope they're being paid well enough to do this for us. And secondly, a little birdie told me that it is David Walker's birthday today. So,
oh wow!
Birthday.
Secondary toast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy birthday, David!
Happy birthday!
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, I want to extend that toast then, because I have gone out to the market. I still go to the farmers market because the farmers are growing food, and suddenly everybody's like, well, at least it's outside and people are largely being cool. So whereas maybe before I didn't feel like I had the time, I'm going to the farmers markets, and I'm still going to see my meat guy and my my fish guy. So people who are out there on the front lines being grocers and selling us food. So that, I mean, it's we don't think about this. The sort of equity, all these people that are making, in many cases, not the greatest wage and now look essential. It's like, oh, well, maybe they were always essential. So, here's to them being essential and staying essential past, this crisis. Cheers.
Exactly. Cheers. Jess, how about you?
Yeah, I like to cheers to the children. Even if you don't have them, we were all children at some point. And, these are little people who have maybe not the same full scope of what's going on in the world today, yet they are impacted on a day-to-day basis. They're not able to see their friends. Their soccer games have been canceled, proms have been canceled. Kind of a lot of these like childhood memories that we've all experienced, aren't necessarily going to happen for these kids. And so I think that they're still waking up every day and they're still, homeschooling and probably dealing with some parents who are a little more stressed than they were a couple months ago. And so I just like to give a shout out to the kids.
Absolutely. Cheers to the kids.
Cheers to the kids. Are we allowed to do that?
Cheers to those who can't cheers with us.
Yes.
I'll piggyback on that one and add a cheers to the caretakers. I know the reason I'm able to be on this call is that my mother-in-law has stepped up and helped us with childcare. And, this goes to parents but all the other people who have stepped up and helped with childcare in a world where suddenly it all disappeared, and a lot of parents and extended family members and friends watching people who kids who they expected to be in school, and I know those people have made my life able to function in the last couple of months. So cheers to them.
Cheers.
Cheers. Absolutely.
All right. Well, then I'll complete the loop. I'm going to toast the recovered. And on a personal note, I called my parents this morning in a sleepy little village in England, and they're a couple of octogenarians who've actually just scrambled out of COVID. They spent 2 weeks infected with it. The sun was shining, and it was my birthday, so I called them, and my mother looked at me and she said, "You look so old, David." And, I absolutely knew they've recovered, and I'd like to raise a glass to all the recovered. So,
cheers.
Cheers. Wow.
Oh, great.
That
well,
was
Garrett, Bart, thank you guys so much for joining us today. This has been so fun, and I look forward to being able to go visit Brooklyn Brewery again. I miss being up there. I miss New York, and love what you guys do, and really appreciate the wisdom both y'all brought today.
I request. Me too. And if they say in the Caribbean, soon come.
I request that you put out improved old fashioned again.
Oh man, that was the hardest to make beer that we ever made, but I feel you.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hello.
Hello.
And then there were 2 or 4. But
Then there were 4. So guys, you are on both coasts. David, I know California was early hit, and how are things going with Firestone Walker right now?
Well, I think California's done a pretty good job of reacting pretty quickly. Who knows what the numbers tell you, but they, what I read in the same journals that everybody else reads, we seem to be surviving. And, we're right in the center of the state, so we're really not impacted. We're impacted, but certainly nowhere, not even close to Garrett and the folks in the East. So all is good. In as good as it can be. The brewery's brewing away. we're learning to operate in a socially distant world, that actually is sort of cool, because we're learning things about ourselves and learning new procedures, and maybe, it's a sign of the future. But we're doing okay. I mean, our brewing has shifted from brewing keg. I mean, about 35% of our volume was in kegs. That's all moved now to grocery stores. But grocery stores are keeping us in beer.
Does social distancing extend all the way to like brewing operations and everything?
Yes, it does. It's sort of like everybody. We're scrambling to put together guidelines because we've sort of made it through the initial sort of fire, and we've come through the other side and realized, hang on a second, it's going to be like this for 12 months. So we better put some operating procedures in that will keep us safe. And so we're beginning to build those socially distant protocols for folks in the brewery. I mean, we've done like most. We've split our shifts, so there's a downtime between each shift. We have a group who come in and disinfect everything and sanitize everything, even more so. Brewers don't share break rooms, and I mean, there's a whole series of things that we're doing and learning every day. I mean, one of the great things is this great collaboration going on in the US. I mean, we're calling all our brethren, and they're sort of saying, okay, we're doing this, are you doing that, and so on and so forth. So that's huge. I mean, this whole thing is surreal, as you know. I mean, we're sort of living in this, we're all hibernating, but this hibernation is so rich because we're surrounded by our family and friends, and so you sort of feel guilty about smiling, and I mean, the whole thing is very confusing.
Yeah.
But,
That is amazing thing about the craft brewing industry that has always struck me is just the camaraderie among what in many industries would be thinking of each other as competitors, but I always see brewers helping each other out with advice, with equipment, with whatever needs to happen, and I'm absolutely seeing that right now.
Well, and as a beer fan, I know that, like, when I go to a festival like the Firestone Walker Invitational and Burial is there at the festival, I know that it is a vote of admiration from one brewery to another. That's one of the reasons why I thought we should have you two on the call together, because I know that your breweries have a connection like that already.
Absolutely. I was totally going to come out to the festival later this month and celebrate my birthday that weekend, but alas, maybe next year.
It will be next year. It has to be next year.
How big of a hit is it to not have a Firestone Walker Invitational this year?
It's not a hit. I mean, it's not a commercial event for us. It's a gathering of friends and sort of a moment of beer culture. So it feels empty, like Thanksgiving dinner. Not having Thanksgiving dinner feels empty. I mean, we have all this time now to do other stuff, whatever stuff we can do. But I mean, we're all looking forward to next year, and it's very odd. It's a very odd experience.
Jim would always come back raving about how great that festival was. So, I mean, it sounds like an amazing thing.
It's the best festival. There's really no competition.
I think the heat might help. There's always this sort of giddy feeling.
Actually, the last year was really nice. It was the first one I gone to where it wasn't like approaching 100 degrees out. So,
no, it's a great experience for everybody.
Looking back at the beginning of this sort of quarantine period is really surreal for me now, because I was on my honeymoon at the time in Asheville, North Carolina, and I was having dinner at Burial Forestry Camp on the night when I read the news on my phone, like Tom Hanks and NBA season is canceled and everything, and we were like just wrapping up dinner at Burial when that happened, and just looking back on that feels like it was a lifetime ago at this point. And I'm having been to Asheville many times. I'm sort of curious, Jess, how how the sort of more insular Asheville beer community has been dealing with things.
Yeah, I think that kind of like a lot of beer communities, we kind of have a lot of different types of breweries. Those that are, larger, who were already heavily packaging, who have a lot of grocery partners. And so like their experience, right, with this shutdown is going to be different than the smaller breweries that are, on premise draft only. So for us, it's been this kind of like Asheville has a beer community, of course, but like Asheville is a community, right? So it's really been a band together of not just the breweries, but the breweries and the restaurants and the farmers, and the hospital workers, and like just seeing there's been so much just inspiration and camaraderie, even like cross industry, that has been just inspirational, and I think like really helped folks find a new normal, and will now help us ride what's going to inevitably be a resurgence of finding now another new normal.
Mm-hmm. How would you say the Asheville brewery landscape compares now to the moment that Wicked Weed sold to AB InBev?
Ooh, I don't know. That one went down in history. That was such a interesting moment for the Asheville community, because Asheville by nature is made up of like something like 95% of local small businesses. So kind of that decision, which is, certainly a personal one, that, it is what it is, that it was hard for the Asheville community to kind of get behind it initially. Where they stand on it now, I couldn't tell you. But, for Asheville, we're such a tourist-driven city.
Yeah.
That has really been the main issue, right, for us currently, like as a community. Where that's the huge hit is the lack of tourism. We're a city of 80,000 people, so it's small. And you see a lot of these small businesses that rely on the May, June, July, August to start like banking to be able to prepare for the January, February, March, where we see a significant drop in that tourism. So we were all like getting really excited, beginning of March, you start to be like, oh, great, the people are coming back, and they haven't yet, So I think that it's a different kind of landscape because of that versus the Wicked Weed, which felt more like a personal, local, hyper local kind of thing, where this is like kind of a tourism, like a lack of tourism, and how do you cope with that, and realizing how much we all did rely on that.
The idea of driving to Asheville right now, I would give anything to just be able to go, to enjoy the city like I have so many times.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
Go ahead, Jim.
It's interesting when you talk about sort of reaching out into new areas, because Burial just launched a new line called Visuals that is wine and vermouth.
Yes.
And somebody else earlier on the call, I think I can't remember who it was talking about breweries getting into other things, distillation or winemaking and everything. And we have a really nice one here in Richmond, Virginia, also that's called Garden Grove. That's a brewery winery, and their wine is great. It's all local Virginia wine and everything. I haven't had a chance to try your wine and vermouth yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. And it goes along with the Forestry Camp restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of this extension of your philosophy.
Right.
I wonder how you would characterize, like, overall how you're broadening the brand.
Yeah, I think when we started Burial, Doug, Tim, and I, and when it was such a part of our identity for so long, and we certainly, as the business grew, we started to come to terms with the fact that we had built a brand, and that the brand is not necessarily a direct representation anymore of Doug, Tim, and Jess. So that was kind of like epiphany number one a couple of years ago. And so now it's kind of making decisions based around the Burial brand, not necessarily based around Doug, Jess, and Tim's personal interests, right? So, so when we opened Forestry Camp, it was this opportunity to kind of like tap back into that, and something that, you know, we have certainly found so much inspiration and passion in is the camaraderie, like we were talking about before, in beer and craft beverages and in restaurants, and just, you know, what a bunch of like passionate people. You know, we've met so many of them along the way that we were like, what we want to start doing is we want to start telling other people's stories, you know, and that's where the restaurant kind of came to life. And that's why we didn't brand it specifically as Burial, that we wanted to be able to focus on makers and the people who have inspired us and continue to inspire us and will inspire us in the future. You know, and visuals is kind of a birth from that concept of like, you start meeting people like winemakers and they start to inspire you, and you start to do your research and become passionate about other craft beverages and other people, you know, and other similar but different industries. And that's kind of what has led us to wine and vermouth.
That's great. Well, congratulations. And David, what excites you about the future of Firestone Walker?
That it's enduring. That, you know, if anything, this last 8-10 weeks has taught me is that we're absolutely doing the right thing. And that people love great beer, and people love working at the brewery and coming to the brewery, and people miss the brewery. So yeah, I mean, it's and you know, just gathering at a table at night with a bottle of wine and some beer, you know, just reminded me how fabulous beer is, and what we're doing is you know, it's not trivial. It's whatever you want to call it, sort of social lubrication or whatever, but it's fabulous. So yeah, this is, you know, the future for us is good. And you know, it's brought us together. I mean, it's all about sort of trying to keep the band together, trying to make sure we don't do silly things. And I mean, you know, breweries, outside of all the magic they create in terms of beer, I mean, they're mortal. I mean, they're just like a ball bearing business. I mean, you've got to keep everything moving forward. Otherwise, the Grim Reaper will come get you as much as it will get anybody else. So, but if we can get through this, we can get through anything, absolutely anything. And my sense is we're coming through it, and it's a shared experience that will leave a mark on all of us at the brewery. So
I think you're absolutely right. The idea that we've learned to appreciate what we had across so many different channels, but in particular, the idea, I went to a brewery, you know, we're open here in Georgia very carefully, and went and socially distanced with some friends. We were, you know, 6 feet apart, sitting around a big table and drinking and catching up, and how special that felt to be able to do that again is unbelievable. Yep. And that's, you know, I think something that so many of us miss and are looking forward to, and it's breweries like the two that you guys run that make it possible. So thank you, and thank you for being here today. This was so much fun.
And it'll, you know what, it'll happen again, I promise you. So,
well, the brewery I went to makes a beer. It's Wild Heaven Brewery, right down the street from me. They make a beer called We Will Meet Again. So absolutely.
Good news. Well done.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Good to see you, Jess. Good
Bye.
job.